This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. My faith in reading souls, once steadfast, shattered that night, drenched in rain and revelation, as the stranger beside me unmasked his true darkness. Elara, that's me. For a year, the city's arteries were my workplace, my chariot, a mundane sedan navigating the currents of humanity for a rideshare app. Not a calling, just sustenance, seasoned with fleeting glimpses into other lives, or so I believed before the deluge. Late October bled into a Friday night swallowed by tempestuous rain, the kind that dissolves the world into smeared neon and blinding headlight flares. Hours blurred, ferrying sodden revelers and drained professionals across the slick, mirrored streets. Exhaustion beckoned, but a final ping echoed, a summons from the city's frayed edge near a skeletal industrial park. A zone whispered about, yet the surge multiplier gleamed like forbidden fruit. What harm lurked in one last fare? A foolish gamble, whispered hindsight. Beneath a sputtering streetlight, a silhouette materialized, tall, gaunt, swallowed by a dark, hooded sweatshirt pulled low, obscuring features. A nondescript duffel hung from one shoulder. An electric tremor, pure instinct, urged retreat. Drive away. But the ghost of past judgments, of being misread myself, stayed my hand. Who was I to cast stones based on shadows? The locks clicked open. He folded himself into the back seat, bringing the chill of the storm and an indefinable, unsettling scent. Appreciate the stop, his voice rasped, low like stones shifting. This part of town, this weather, not many would. A phantom smile touched my lips, reflected in the rearview mirror where his eyes met mine. Obsidian pools, intense, sending an icy tendril down my spine. No trouble, I managed, striving for normalcy. Destination? He named a place, an hour distant, deep in the rural unknown. A significant fare, yes, but far beyond familiar territory. The GPS ingested the coordinates. We merged into the rain-lashed night. Silence descended, thick and cloying, punctuated only by the hypnotic sweep of the wipers and the relentless drumming on the roof. The road demanded focus, yet I felt his gaze, a palpable weight on the back of my neck, tracking every subtle shift. The quiet stretched, taut as wire. Quite a night, I ventured, voice tight, desperate to puncture the bubble of unease. What pulls someone so far out into this? A chasm of silence followed. Had he even heard? Then his words, delivered softly, landed like shards of ice. Running, he breathed, from bad things. My hands clenched the wheel, knuckles blanching. Oh! The sound barely escaped my throat. Like... He leaned closer, his breath near my ear, a chilling intimacy. Like the law, he whispered. They're hunting me because I did something unforgivable. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I feared he could hear. What? The question choked me. What was it? He leaned back, a smile audible in his tone, cold and sharp. Why don't we find a quiet spot? Pull over here. I'll give you a demonstration. Primal alarms shrieked, Go! Faster! Escape! But the highway stretched desolate, flanked by dripping monolithic trees. Nowhere to run. I don't think so, I stammered, voice trembling. Let's just get you where you're going. His hand shot out, clamping onto my shoulder, fingers biting deep with startling force. Pull. Over. Now. Numbly, I obeyed, guiding the car onto the slick, muddy verge. The instant the wheels stilled, he was out, a shadow circling to my side. My fingers fumbled with the lock, a futile gesture. He wrenched the door open, hauling me out into the downpour. I stumbled, landing hard on my knees in the cold mire. Looking up, he loomed above, rainwater plastering his hoodie to him, and in his hand, something glinted wickedly, a knife, its edge catching the distant watery lights. Please, I sobbed, rain and tears merging into a salty torrent on my face. Don't. He crouched, the blade hovering near my cheek, a grotesque parody of tenderness. Ah, but I must, he murmured. Loose ends, you understand. Can't have witnesses. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the steel's kiss. Instead, a sound utterly incongruous erupted. Laughter. Deep, rolling laughter that convulsed his frame. Disoriented, I watched as he extended a hand, helping me rise. Gods, he gasped, wiping moisture, rain or tears, from his eyes. Your face. Absolutely classic. Confusion warred with lingering terror. What is this? He beamed, the menace evaporating like mist. Relax, darling. It's for the channel. Gotcha. He tapped a tiny lens affixed to his hoodie. World-class prank. A wave of dizzying relief crashed over me, instantly consumed by a surge of white-hot fury. Are you insane? I shoved him hard. You terrified me. What is wrong with you? His grin faltered. Whoa, easy. It's comedy. People eat this up online. My retort died on my lips as a new sound pierced the night. The unmistakable wail of sirens, rapidly approaching. Color drained from his face, replaced by stark panic. Damn it, he hissed. Someone saw. Called it in. We need to vanish. But I planted my feet. No, I stated, voice ringing with newfound steel. I'm staying. You can explain your comedy to them. His features hardened, the mask slipping to reveal something genuinely ugly beneath. I'm not asking, he snarled, seizing my arm again. The earlier menace flooded back, chillingly authentic this time. I fought against his iron grip, but he was stronger, dragging me towards the car, his fingers bruising my skin. In that desperate moment, instinct flared. A long-forgotten self-defense lesson echoed. Anything can be a weapon. My free hand found the keys still clutched in my pocket. With a single, fluid motion, I swung them upward, the jagged metal tearing across his cheek. A raw howl of pain ripped from him as he staggered back, hand flying to his face. I didn't wait. I ran, down the slick highway, towards the pulsing blue and red lights slicing through the rain. His heavy footfalls pounded behind me, but terror lent wings to my feet. The police cruiser materialized, a beacon in the storm. I waved frantically, screaming. Brakes shrieked. 2 officers spilled out, weapons raised. Down! Now! One commanded. I collapsed onto the wet asphalt, heart threatening to burst. A brief, violent struggle erupted behind me, ending with the sharp ratchet of handcuffs. Gentle hands helped me up as I turned, shivering, to see my assailant being forced into the cruiser's cage. His eyes met mine, a across the rain-streaked distance, burning with undiluted hatred. "Are you okay, miss?" an officer asked softly, draping a coarse blanket around my trembling shoulders. I could only nod, tremors racking my body in delayed reaction. "Yes, I think. Thank you." Hours unfolded under the sterile hum of the police station lights. I recounted the night's events, my voice thin. The man, Silas, it turned out, wasn't just a cruel prankster. He had a documented history, a pattern of jokes spiraling into violence. The duffel bag, searched, yielded rope, duct tape, items painting a picture far darker than any online stunt. Sipping lukewarm coffee, trying to reassemble my shattered composure, a detective approached, his expression grave but kind. "Miss Vance," he began gently, using my real surname. "This was horrific, I know, but your courage tonight, it likely prevented far worse. We've been pursuing Silas for months. He was slippery. You stopped him." His words offered little solace then, only a profound numbness. The chasm I had skirted, the headline I almost became, the reality was a crushing weight. Returning to the mundane proved difficult. The click of a car lock became a ritual of anxiety. Every face in the rearview mirror held a flicker of potential menace. Yet, slowly, painstakingly, through therapy's quiet guidance and the unwavering anchor of loved ones, healing began. I learned the crucial distinction between vigilance and prejudice, the vital necessity of prioritizing self-preservation over politeness. The rideshare app was deleted. That chapter closed. But the experience birthed a new purpose, advocating for safety, for listening to that inner alarm. Sharing my ordeal became a way to reclaim the narrative, perhaps arming others with the awareness I nearly lacked. That tempestuous night irrevocably altered the landscape of my life, yet it also unearthed a resilience I hadn't known resided within. Caution is now my constant companion, but fear will not be my master. For every Silas casting shadows, legions of decent souls walk the earth. That truth remains a beacon, piercing even the deepest, rain-soaked darkness. "11:42, Tuesday night, Route 16, slicing through featureless terrain. That precise moment marked the unraveling of sense. I was piloting my sedan homeward after a long warehouse shift, the steering wheel tacky beneath my palms from a poorly managed energy drink. Headlights punched tunnels through the absolute dark, illuminating only fallow fields flanking the two-lane blacktop. No civic glow out here, merely the intermittent wink of shoulder reflectors. Static whispered around a late-night broadcast dissecting phantom signals. My attention drifted elsewhere. Then, caught in the high beam glare, a silhouette etched against the roadside gravel. Dark coat, denim trousers, umber hair. Leo's height, Leo's frame, Leo's unmistakable profile. My foot slammed the brake pedal, an instinct preceding conscious thought. The vehicle protested, tires biting asphalt before skidding onto the shoulder, gravel spitting beneath the wheels. I stopped perhaps 20 feet past him. In the rearview mirror, a chilling tableau. The figure ambled toward my car. Leo's gait, precisely. That faint hitch, born of an old gridiron injury. His gaze remained fixed on the ground, hands plunged deep into pockets. I leaned across the passenger seat, thumb hovering over the unlock button. The dome light painted the dashboard in stark, unsettling chiaroscuro. A vibration erupted from the cup holder. My phone, alive. Leo's name flared on the screen. My hand froze mid-reach. Eyes flicked from the glowing phone to the mirror. The figure was 10 feet away now. I snatched up the phone, answered. Hey, Elias? Heading home finally? Mom's been pinging you about Sunday dinner. Leo's voice, crisp and immediate, utterly familiar through the speaker. Where are you? My throat felt like sandpaper. Home. Where else at this hour? Just tucked the kids in. The crunch of footsteps drew nearer, just behind the car. You're certain you're home? Yeah, man. Haven't left since I got back this evening. You all right? Sound a bit ragged. Another glance into the rear view. The figure stood directly behind my bumper, head still bowed, that characteristic limp defining its posture in the dim light. Elias, still there? A tremor started in my hands. Sweat traced cold paths down my spine, despite the air conditioning blasting Arctic air. Leo, listen. Do something for me. Now, this instant. Go to your front window. Look out and tell me what you see. What? Why the hell? Please just do it. A rustle came through the phone, the distant sound of footsteps on polished wood. The figure outside had reached the passenger door. Its face remained obscured, lost in shadow. Nothing, Leo reported. Same old view. The Wilson's place across the way, the corner streetlight humming. What am I supposed to be seeing? The passenger door handle depressed with a soft click. My hand shot out, slamming the lock button down as I stomped the accelerator. Tires spun frantically on loose stone before finding purchase. The engine howled, launching the car forward. In the mirror, the figure stood motionless in the swirling dust, kicked up by my tires, head perpetually downturned, shrinking rapidly as speed devoured the distance. Elias, what in God's name is going on? Tire squeal echoed faintly through the phone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat making speech difficult. I'm Route 16, maybe 10 miles out. I thought I saw... Saw what? I thought I saw you, standing beside the road. A beat of silence stretched across the line. Elias, I haven't been out of this house since 6 p.m., nowhere near Route 16. The speedometer needle climbed past 80, the dashed yellow lines merging into a hypnotic stream. My knuckles were white mountains on the steering wheel. Stay on the line with me, I managed. Just keep talking. Okay, sure. Want me to drive out, meet you? No, absolutely not. Stay put. Just tell me about your day. What did the kids get up to? Anything. And so Leo talked. He recounted his son's near home run at baseball practice, his daughter's messy triumph with finger paints, the reheated casserole they'd had for supper. Mundane details, tangible reality. I clung to the sound of his voice, trying to regulate my breathing to its cadence, but my gaze kept snapping to the rearview mirror. The road behind was a swallowing void, punctuated only by the receding crimson glow of my taillights. Yet, the atmosphere inside the car felt charged, heavy, thick with the imminence of a storm. Maple Street bled into Oak Drive. Familiar territory. Streetlights cast pools of orange. Houses materialized from the gloom. My driveway beckoned. Nearly there, I told Leo. Stay with me till I'm inside. Naturally, need me to head over? No, just, I'll call you back in a few. I swung into the driveway, cutting the engine. The sudden silence pressed in, alien after the drone of the highway. I sat for a long moment, key still turned, listening to the faint rhythm of Leo's breath over the phone. You home? He asked. Yeah, driveway. Go inside, Elias. Lock up tight. I grabbed my work satchel, pushed the door open. The motion sensor above the garage flared, bathing the concrete in harsh, clinical white. Everything appeared aggressively normal. Chloe's SUV parked neatly beside mine, the blue recycling bins standing sentinel, the garden hose coiled like a dormant serpent against the siding. I fumbled with the keys at the front door, metal jingling against metal, my hand unsteady. It took 3 attempts to seat the key correctly in the lock. Inside, I announced to Leo, stepping over the threshold. Gonna check everything, then call you. All right, be careful. I ended the call and began a meticulous circuit of the ground floor, testing each window latch, confirming each deadbolt was thrown. Upstairs, Chloe slept peacefully. Her soft exhalations were audible when I eased the bedroom door open a crack. Nothing was amiss. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of water, my hand still betraying me, sloshing liquid over the rim as I raised it. My phone buzzed again. Leo. Hey, I answered, voice low. You okay now? Yeah, mostly. House is secure. Chloe's asleep. Good. Listen, Elias. I was thinking, remember that story Father used to tell about driving home late from the lumberyard? A knot tightened in my gut. The one where he saw himself on the road. That's the one. Said he was working overtime, driving his usual route back. Saw a guy standing on the shoulder. Got closer, realized it was him. His own reflection, somehow. Wearing the same work clothes. Said he just floored it, never looked back, never saw it again. He was probably exhausted, pulling too many doubles. Maybe, but he swore it was real, right up until the end. Always called it some kind of omen. I took another shaky sip of water. An omen of what? He never figured it out. Nothing terrible ever happened to him directly after. Lived another 30 years, didn't he? A shared silence hummed between us. What did it look like? Leo asked eventually, his voice hushed. The thing you saw tonight? It looked exactly like you, Leo. That brown jacket you always wear, the jeans, even walked with that limp, but it wouldn't look up, kept its face hidden the entire time. What do you think would have happened if you'd unlocked the door? I don't want to entertain that thought. Another pause stretched. I should try and get some sleep, I said finally. Got the early shift. Okay, call me if anything feels off. Seriously, anytime. I appreciate it. I disconnected and lingered in the darkened kitchen, the familiar night sounds of the house, the refrigerator's low thrum, the dishwasher's rhythmic clicks, doing little to soothe me. Eventually, I climbed the stairs. Chloe murmured something indistinct as I slid into bed beside her, but didn't wake. I lay staring into the blackness above, replaying the night's events. The roadside apparition, Leo's voice anchoring me to reality, the impossible figure. Sleep must have claimed me, because the insistent buzz of my alarm wrenched me back. 5:30. Pale dawn light filtered weakly through the blinds. Chloe was already downstairs, the aroma of brewing coffee drifting up. She offered a kiss as I entered the kitchen. You were late getting in, she observed mildly. Yeah, hit some unexpected delays. The words felt inadequate, dishonest, but the truth seemed unspeakable. I moved through the morning rituals numbly. Shower, dress, coffee, keys. Chloe reminded me about dinner at her parents' on Saturday. I nodded, her words barely registering. My car sat innocuously in the driveway, bathed in the ordinary light of morning, but as I opened the passenger door to toss my lunch bag onto the seat, my breath hitched. Gravel. A scattering of small sharp stones on the floor mat, identical to the gravel lining the shoulder of Route 16. With hands that had rediscovered their tremor, I brushed the stones out onto the concrete, started the engine, and reversed onto the street. The commute unfolded with banal normalcy. Traffic signals, fellow commuters, the predictable rhythm of the morning rush. Top 40 hits replaced conspiracy theories on the radio. Everything was ostensibly fine, except for the compulsive glances into the rearview mirror, except for the persistent, unnerving sensation of being watched, followed, except for the echo of Leo's words about our father's experience. An omen, he'd called it. But what could it possibly portend? I reached the warehouse, clocked in, immersed myself in the familiar routine. Manifests, inventory logs, shipping codes. Yet, concentration proved elusive. Every flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, every unexpected footstep behind me, caused a jolt of adrenaline. Closing my eyes brought only one image, the figure on the highway, head bowed, limping through the darkness. Around noon, my phone vibrated. Leo again. Hey, checking in. How are you holding up? Fine, working. Listen, I did some digging online about encounters like yours. It's not unheard of. Doppelgangers, fetches, people seeing exact copies of loved ones, almost always roadside, usually nocturnal. Sometimes they try to interact, sometimes they just observe. Leo, I don't think I want to know. Right, but here's the potentially reassuring part. In most accounts, Nothing catastrophic follows. Like with Father, it's more like a glitch, a glimpse of something parallel, maybe, but not inherently malevolent. There was gravel on my passenger floor mat this morning. The silence on the other end was heavy. That's impossible, Elias, Leo said slowly. You never opened the door. I know. We let that impossibility hang in the air. Just be vigilant driving home tonight, he finally said. Yeah. I ended the call, returning to the stacks of paperwork. The afternoon dragged interminably. Each opening door, each shadow stretching in the corridors, heightened my anxiety. Finally, the shift ended. I stood in the parking lot for a long while, keys clutched tightly, staring at my car as the setting sun bled fiery oranges and reds across the sky. I could deviate, take the long way home, circumvent Route 16 entirely, add 20 minutes, maybe 30, but avoidance felt like surrender. Father had driven on, faced whatever it was, and lived decades more. I had to do the same. I slid behind the wheel, started the engine. Darkness rapidly consumed the lingering twilight. Soft rock played quietly on the radio, a fragile counterpoint to my own heightened senses, listening for any sound beyond the ordinary. Route 16 unfurled before me, a ribbon of blacktop through the encroaching night. Empty fields, no streetlights, just the twin beams of my headlights probing the void. Sweat slicked my palms again. Every roadside shadow seemed poised to coalesce into a human form. Every reflector momentarily flashed like watchful eyes. I passed the exact spot from the previous night. Nothing, only gravel, dormant grass, and impenetrable darkness. Then, headlights bloomed in my rearview mirror. A car approaching from behind. Relief washed over me. A released breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Normal traffic. The headlights intensified, drawing closer, becoming blindingly bright. Too bright. I squinted, trying to discern the vehicle's shape, but the glare was overwhelming, bleaching all detail into painful white light. My phone rang. Leo's name illuminated the screen. I answered, my voice tight. Elias? On your way? Yeah, nearly home. Got someone riding my tail. Headlights are searing. What kind of car? Can't tell. The lights are just too much. A solid wall of white. Pull over, Elias. Let them pass. I eased the car onto the shoulder, the familiar crunch of gravel beneath the tires. The blinding headlights remained fixed behind me. They're not passing, I reported to Leo, my heart rate accelerating again. Don't stop then, keep moving. I merged back onto the highway. The vehicle mirrored my move, maintaining its proximity, its lights still piercing. Still right behind me. How far out are you? 5 miles, maybe less. Okay, listen carefully. Do not stop again. Whatever you see, whatever happens, just drive straight home. Don't stop until you're in the driveway. Abruptly, the headlights behind me vanished, not dimmed, not switched off gradually, simply extinguished, gone. I checked the mirror again. The road behind was utterly black, but then movement caught my eye. Along the shoulder, a figure materializing from the darkness, head bowed, moving with that slight, unmistakable limp. Leo! The name escaped as a strangled whisper. What? What is it? It's back, but different. It's walking, following me on foot. Keep driving, do not stop. I'm not stopping. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The engine screamed its protest. 70, 80, 90 miles per hour. Glancing in the mirror, the figure was still there, proceeding at a normal walking pace, yet impossibly, terrifyingly, keeping pace with my speeding car. Almost home, I muttered, a mantra against the rising panic. The figure seemed closer now, still confined to the shoulder, still walking, but drawing nearer with each frantic second, defying physics. I swerved onto Maple Street. Street lights, houses, the illusion of safety. The figure turned the corner with me. Oak Drive, my street, my house, visible ahead. I'm nearly there. Good, get inside quickly. I slammed into the driveway, killed the engine, fumbled for my bag. A final horrifying glance in the mirror. The figure stood at the foot of my driveway, a silent sentinel. I bolted for the front door, keys shaking violently, the lock finally yielding. Inside, I gasped into the phone. It's standing out front. Close the blinds, all of them. Don't look out. I raced through the house, yanking cords, snapping blinds shut, double-checking locks already secured. Chloe wasn't home yet. Her hospital shift ran late tonight. Okay, done. Everything shut tight. Good, now what? I risked a peek through a tiny gap between the living room blinds. The figure was gone. It's not there. Vanished. You're certain? I moved from window to window, peering cautiously. Empty driveway. Empty street beneath the sodium lights. Yeah, it's gone. Leo exhaled audibly. Okay, that's good. What the hell is happening, Elias? I have no idea, but you're safe now. You're home. Exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. I collapsed onto the sofa. What if it comes back? Then we face it, together. Yeah, together. We sat in shared silence for a moment, the only sound our breathing across the miles. I should call Chloe, I said. Make sure she's okay on her drive. Good idea. Call me back when you're done. Will do. I hung up, dialed Chloe's number. It rang 4 times before connecting. Hey love, just walking out now. Home in about 20. Okay, drive carefully. Always. Love you. Love you too. I ended the call, sitting alone in the dim living room, listening again to the house's familiar nocturnal symphony, the hum of the fridge, the click of the thermostat, normal sounds in an abnormal world. My phone buzzed. A text message from Leo. Check your passenger side floor mat. A cold dread seeped into me. I went to the front door, peered through the fisheye lens of the peephole. Nothing but empty concrete. Unlocking the door, I stepped out into the cool night air and opened the passenger side of my car. The dome light flickered on, revealing a fresh scattering of small sharp stones across the floor mat. Gravel. I shut the car door, locked it remotely, retreated back inside the presumed safety of my home, and dialed Leo. There's gravel in the car again. A pause. I suspected there might be. What does it mean, Leo? I don't know, Elias. Maybe nothing. Or maybe it means everything. I walked to the window again, pulling the blind aside just enough to see. The street remained empty, quiet under the artificial moon of the corner lamp. But somewhere, beyond the light, in the vast unlit stretches, I felt its presence, waiting, watching, walking endlessly onward with that familiar borrowed limp. Head down, always, always head down. This account was never meant for other eyes, a secret festering within these walls and within me. Yet silence becomes unbearable. Below, in the subterranean chill, rests a door secured against entry, and from its far side, something persistently speaks my name. Elias. Not metaphorically, mind you. An actual voice, threading through the dense grain of the wood. It began one starless night, and has woven itself into the fabric of my existence since. I must unravel this now, tether it to words, before the conviction that I'm unraveling within my own home takes permanent root. 6 months have dissolved since I took possession of this modest 2-story dwelling. Its porch groans a welcome, the kitchen wears its age openly, and the cellar breathes a perpetual dampness. The property itself felt muted then, withdrawn. Down in that subterranean space, the anomalous door caught my eye almost immediately. A slab of thick timber, bound shut by a formidable, rust-bloomed padlock, its hinges like clenched fists. A tentative pull confirmed its immovability. A forgotten pantry, perhaps, sealed by departed occupants. With no key forthcoming and mountains of unpacked life demanding attention, I relegated it to the periphery of my concerns. The initial weeks were a blur of transformation, walls shedding old skins for new coats of paint, furniture finding its reluctant place. My profession consumed the daylight hours, depositing me back home well after dusk. The cellar, consequently, devolved into a repository for the unwanted and undecided. Cast-off garments, boxes bristling with tools, the flotsam of a life in transit. The locked portal down there faded into the background hum, a sealed fact I felt no compulsion to investigate. Upstairs held challenges enough. Until a particular midnight found me suspended in the space between wakefulness and sleep. A sound, insistent and rhythmic, pricked the silence. Faint initially, a susurrus I dismissed as wind-worried branches against glass. I rose, prowled the upper floors, peered through darkened panes. Nothing amiss. Yet, returning to bed, the sound amplified, clarifying into a distinct cadence. A rapping, not erratic, but measured. A knot tightened low in my gut. My own pulse became a frantic counterpoint. The source, undeniably, lay beneath my feet, The cellar. Panic isn't my usual companion for nocturnal noises, but this felt intentional. Each knock punctuated by a weighted pause, an invitation to reply. Clutching a torch, feet shoved into shoes, I descended. Each stair, tread groaned under my cautious weight. The air possessed a palpable chill, or perhaps it was merely the ice forming along my nerves. Reaching the basement's threshold, the rapping ceased abruptly. I flipped the switch. A weak bulb cast long, dancing shadows across the concrete floor, illuminating the path towards the sealed enigma at the far wall. Nothing stirred in the main space. Down the final steps I crept, knuckles white on the banister, the torch beam trembling in my grasp, my own breath ragged in the stillness. I approached the locked door. All seemed as before, the padlock shedding rust like metallic tears. Then, a flicker in the wood itself, a subtle, outward swell, instantaneous, like a held breath released. I froze, legs turned to water, a strange heat blooming in my chest, my light fixed upon the spot. Again, the surface yielded, as if under pressure from within. And then, my name, Elias, not shouted, but intimately clear, a whisper meant only for me, seemingly passing straight through the barrier of wood. Instinct screamed retreat. Flee upstairs, dial a number, any number, but who listens to such tales at this hour without judgment? My gaze darted about, desperate for a mundane culprit. Groaning pipes, acoustic trickery, but the resonance was wrong. It was vocal, human almost. One last glance at the impassive wood, then a stumbling withdrawal, ascending the stairs without daring a backward look. The upper basement door clicked shut behind me, its lock engaged. Sleep that night was a shallow, troubled affair. Daylight brought a fragile shield of denial. Emails awaited answers, errands demanded completion. Perhaps exhaustion had conjured phantoms. A waking dream? Yet, as shadows lengthened, unease coiled within me once more. The house settled into its nocturnal quietude, amplifying the silence from below. Television offered thin distraction. My thoughts strayed inexorably downward towards the sealed wood. Curiosity warred with a visceral dread, a gnawing need to know clashing against the chilling memory of that whispered name. It felt far too substantial for mere imagination. Near 11, resolve hardened. If the phenomenon repeated, I would confront it, and repeat it did. Close to midnight, the familiar measured tapping began anew, spaced like hesitant heartbeats. I rose from the sofa, torch resurrected, and compelled myself towards the cellar steps. The instant my soles met the cold concrete below, the rhythm shifted. It quickened, grew insistent, almost frantic, as if acknowledging my presence. Standing perhaps 10 feet shy of the door, I bathed it in the torchlight. The wood visibly trembled with each impact. A faint, cloying scent reached me, stale air, decay, seemingly seeping from beneath the threshold. My mouth was dust, my palms slick with cold sweat. The knocking ceased, then the voice. Elias. A pause. Elias. My spine felt electrified. The thrumming in my neck nearly choked me. With immense effort, I projected my voice, thin and quavering. Who's there? Silence answered. Who is there? Still nothing. Driven by some reckless impulse, I reached out, pressed my palm flat against the door. The wood felt frigid, faintly damp. And then, a distinct, reciprocal pressure from the other side. Gentle, yet undeniable, like a hand mirroring my own. Thought evaporated. I snatched my hand back as if burned, stumbled, spun, and fled the stairs, slamming the upper door, fumbling with the lock. Sleep was impossible that night, my limbs vibrating with residual adrenaline. A wave of nausea washed over me, born not of sickness, but of pure, unadulterated tension. In the ensuing days, my mind wrestled with options. The door had to be breached, its secret exercised, or perhaps the entire frame ripped from the wall. Yet, the prospect petrified me. The voice held no overt menace, but the context, the sheer wrongness of it all, resonated deeply. A locksmith was considered, then dismissed. The ancient padlock defied conventional solutions. Bolt cutters? The thought alone brought a film of sweat to my palms, a constriction in my throat. Each time I edged towards action, a paralyzing inertia took hold. The phenomenon bled into the daylight hours. Faint taps echoed while I brewed coffee in the kitchen. Brief percussive whispers punctuated the drone of the television. Always subterranean. Relaxation became a forgotten luxury. My nerves frayed. Ordinary house sounds, the settling timbers, the refrigerator's hum, became jump scares. One sunlit afternoon, armed with a heavy hammer, I descended again. Perhaps the hinges were the weak point. As I drew near, that subtle shift rippled across the wood like the rise and fall of a chest cavity. My legs threatened to buckle. I retreated, forcing slow breaths against the frantic hammering in my ribs. Just do it. Steeling myself, I advanced, brought the hammer's claw to an upper hinge. Rusted nails held fast, fused to the frame. The door emitted a low, resonant groan, and then, impossibly soft, barely parting the air, a single word. Stop. Directed. Undeniable. I froze, hammer suspended, before scrambling wildly up the stairs, nearly pitching forward in my haste. That whisper cemented my resolve. The door would remain sealed. Time bled onward, marked by the growing certainty of the presence beyond the wood. Unseen movements rustled behind it at odd hours, susurrations like dry leaves, or perhaps shallow breathing drifted up. The cellar became hostile ground, visited only for dire necessities. Laundry, a seldom used tool. Each descent felt like crossing a border into occupied territory. Night brought escalation. The knocking intensified, sometimes persisting for an hour, punctuated by brief lulls. My name, Elias, became a recurring motif, spoken in that same dispassionate tone, not angry, not pleading, simply stated, as if testing its sound, ensuring my reception. Occasionally, a faint tremor would travel through the floorboards beneath my feet, a low thrum that settled uneasily in my stomach. Headphones offered little solace. The impacts seemed to resonate directly in my bones. Sleep fragmented into restless dozing, plagued by nightmares where the locked door would violently implode, revealing only void, yet the disembodied voice would echo my name from the darkness within. For a modicum of peace, I installed a heavy deadbolt on the upper basement door, checking its solidity obsessively. It helped, marginally. Seeking refuge in normalcy, I invited my friend Marco over one evening, carefully omitting any mention of the cellar's secret. We occupied the living room, conversation lubricated by beer, a game flickering on the screen, an oasis of the mundane, until a distinct, albeit muted, knock resonated from below. Marco paused, head tilted. "Pipes," I mumbled, forcing a shrug, though I felt the blood drain from my face. He eyed me curiously, but didn't press. The moment passed. Hours later, he departed, leaving me once more to the sole occupancy of the house and its unsettling companion. Existence narrowed to a state of perpetual vigilance. Each step near the cellar stairs was hesitant. Each unexpected knock sent tremors through my hands. Darkness became an amplifier, so lamps burned throughout the night. I'd lie rigid in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, counting breaths, anticipating the next soft rap, the next quiet utterance of my name. The true Nadia arrived 2 nights past. A mundane task, checking the water heater for leaks, drew me reluctantly into the cellar's maw. I was near the room's center, crouched low, when a sound skidded across the silence. A dry, rasping scrape against the locked door, like fingernails dragged down wood. Bile rose in my throat. I spun, torch beam finding the door. The scraping ceased. Silence stretched, taut. Then, a single concussive knock, heavier than any before. My gaze locked onto the wood. I witnessed it visibly bulge outward, perhaps an inch, maybe 2, before snapping sharply back into place, as if yanked by an immense force from the other side. I recoiled, stumbling, balance failing. No sound escaped my lips. Sheer animal terror propelled me up the stairs, taking them in frantic bounds. My lungs burned. My throat felt raw. The upper door crashed shut. The deadbolt slammed home. I retreated further into the hallway, eyes riveted to the doorknob, half expecting it to twist. It remained still. I have not ventured below since that night. The knocking persists, a muffled rhythm beneath the noise I now use to insulate myself. Loud television, constant music. I perform the rituals of normalcy, cook, clean, engage with work. But beneath it all lies the immutable fact of the sealed door, the entity behind it that knows my name. It never raises its voice, never pleads. It simply knocks and repeats Elias, patiently, endlessly, as if awaiting my eventual compliance with the lock. Departure tempts me. Pack my life, find an anonymous rental far from here. But practicalities intrude. Who buys a house with such a secret? And deeper still, a treacherous curiosity coils, a need to understand what resides in that darkness. Yet whenever resolve flickers, the memory surfaces, the chill pressure against my palm, the disembodied whisper of my name in the subterranean quiet, that final horrifying scrape, and I freeze. My limbs turn to stone, my hands tremble. I retreat again, so I remain, caught in this grim cycle. I inhabit this space. I hear the percussion from below. I feign deafness. Shadows make me flinch. Sometimes, I drift near the basement threshold, testing the frayed edges of my courage. The presence remains steadfast. The knocks do not diminish. The voice does not fade. If anything, its persistence deepens. Yet, it hasn't breached the door, hasn't forced its egress. Perhaps it lacks the power. Or perhaps it merely waits for an invitation. I cannot know. Tonight, 3 heavy thuds resonated around 11. I felt them vibrate through the floorboards. It prompted this confession. Even now, as I commit these words to the screen, I hear the faint, rhythmic tapping. My name, a low susurrus, insistent but indistinct. My nerves are a ruin. A dull ache throbs behind my eyes. My fingers dance erratically on the keys. I sit bathed in the artificial glare of every lamp in the living room, breathing shallowly, quickly. I yearn for resolution, but possess none. I only know the presence endures. The door remains locked, and here I sit, Elias, trapped in my own home, locked in a silent, escalating war of attrition with something on the other side of a door I was never meant to open. For Lara, the ribbon of asphalt unfurling into the horizon had long been a refuge, a place of solitary contemplation. But this particular night, stretching infinite and ink black, twisted that refuge into a snare, haunted by a phantom presence clinging to her wake. Hours bled together under the hypnotic drone of tires on pavement, punctuated only by the fleeting glare of oncoming lights. Deep into the night, well beyond the witching hour, she navigated the final leg of a life upheaval packed into the cargo space of her SUV. An old existence boxed away, a new career beckoning from 2 states distant. Fatigue wrestled with adrenaline, a concoction brewed from stale gas station coffee, and the electric anticipation of beginning anew. Its first appearance registered as little more than twin pinpricks of light in the rearview mirror, just another vessel navigating the nocturnal emptiness. An ancient pickup, perhaps, its finish weathered to a ghostly ash under the lunar glow. It maintained a deferential distance, a quarter-mile specter, constant and initially insignificant. 60 minutes dissolved. Still, it lingered. Each glance backward confirmed it. Those unwavering lamps, fixed at that precise interval. Coincidence? A fellow traveler tracing the same obscure path? Unlikely. A cold prickle traced Alara's spine. Doubt curdled into certainty. She had to know. The next exit sign beckoned, a green promise against the void. Signal clicked. Wheels turned onto the ramp. The phantom followed. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Through the skeletal streets of a sleeping town, she wove an arbitrary path, left onto Elm, right onto Forgotten Main, another sharp right into deeper shadow, and always, always, those headlights mirrored her dance. Not chance. Pursuit. A knot of panic tightened in Alara's chest as she merged back onto the desolate highway. Her grip slicked the steering wheel. Her gaze became magnetically drawn to the mirror. There it sat, a hulking shadow tethered to a bumper. Just kids? A bored trooper? Such thoughts felt flimsy, threadbare rationalizations against the chilling reality. This pursuit felt deliberate, cold, a predator patiently stalking its prey. She stomped the accelerator, the engine whining in protest as the speedometer needle climbed. The truck responded in kind, an effortless echo. She eased off, letting the speed bleed away. It slowed too, settling back into that unnerving orbit, close enough to watch, too far to discern the watcher. Her thoughts scattered like startled birds. A plan? Outrun it? Her capable SUV felt suddenly cumbersome against the unseen potential of the pursuer. Confront it? The image sent ice through her veins. Her fingers scrabbled for her phone, a desperate grasp for connection. The screen glowed starkly. No service. Of course. Swallowed by the immense, indifferent wilderness, miles from any semblance of civilization. Thus began the suffocating waltz, mile after agonizing mile. Each reflective marker, flashing past, underscored her isolation, her terrifying vulnerability. Time stretched thin and brittle. Worse, the needle on the fuel gauge crept relentlessly towards empty. Soon, inevitably, she would be forced to stop. The thought was a physical weight, crushing the air from her lungs. What awaited her when the engine fell silent. Then, a beacon in the oppressive dark. Faded lettering on a green sign promised a rest area 2 miles hence. Hope flared, sudden and fierce. People, lights, perhaps even security. Sanctuary. She veered onto the exit ramp, a wave of premature relief washing over her as the sodium lamps of the rest stop pierce the gloom. But pulling into the vast, empty lot extinguished that hope. Instantly, it lay utterly forsaken. No vehicles shared the asphalt expanse. No welcoming glow emanated from the brick building. Only stark floodlights casting long, distorted shadows. Alara parked beneath one, the glare harsh and unforgiving. She cut the engine, but left the keys poised, her gaze fixed on the rearview mirror, scanning the entrance. Silence descended, thick and watchful. Had the phantom vanished? Was it all a fever dream, born of exhaustion and caffeine? A low rumble shattered the stillness. Headlights swept across the pavement as the truck materialized, rolling with unnerving slowness into the lot. It completed a deliberate loop before gliding to a halt directly behind her, cutting off her only escape route. Alara sat cemented to the seat, her breath catching in shallow, painful rasps. The prelude was over. The performance was about to begin. Paralyzed, she watched the driver's side door of the pickup creak open. A silhouette detached itself from the cab. Tall, wide-set, features lost in the pool darkness beneath a baseball cap's brim. For an agonizing moment, the figure remained motionless, simply observing her car. Then, purposefully, it began to advance. Raw panic detonated within Alara's chest. Her fingers, clumsy with terror, fought the keys. Tremors racked her hands. Finally, ignition. The engine screamed awake, just as the shape loomed beside her window. No time for thought, only instinct. She wrenched the gear stick into reverse, stomped on the gas. Tires shrieked in protest. A sickening thump, followed by a muffled cry. Metal on flesh, or metal on metal. She neither knew nor cared. Ramming the shifter into drive, she launched the SUV forward, tearing out of the desolate lot and hurtling back into the consuming darkness of the highway. Air soared in and out of her lungs. The accelerator remained pinned to the floor, the speedometer needle quivering past 90, then 100, then further still, into reckless velocity. Looking back was unthinkable. The phantom might still be there, impossibly swift. Logic screamed caution, warned of catastrophic loss of control, but primal fear held the reins, propelling her blindly onward. Then, a different illumination painted the rearview mirror, not the steady glare of pursuit, but the frantic strobing of red and blue, a surge of adrenaline, sharp and confusing, capture or rescue. It was the unmistakable silhouette of a state trooper's cruiser. Alara eased off the gas, guiding the trembling vehicle onto the shoulder. Her entire frame vibrated as the officer approached, flashlight beam cutting the dark. The uniformed presence at her window broke the dam. Tears streamed, hot and uncontrollable, a deluge of accumulated terror. The ensuing hours dissolved into a disorienting fog, recounting the ordeal to the patrolman, whose expression remained carefully neutral, then repeating it under the sterile lights of the station for a sergeant whose skepticism was barely veiled. Searches yielded nothing. No sign of the spectral pickup, no corroborating evidence of the chase she described with shaking hands. In the flat, unforgiving light of dawn, the narrative felt frayed, almost hallucinatory. Yet Alara knew. The cold dread had been authentic, the threat viscerally real. Escorted for the first few miles, Alara eventually drove on alone, merging back into the flow of traffic. But the highway no longer felt like an artery of freedom. A profound shift had occurred. The asphalt ribbon now seemed a prowling ground. Every passing truck triggered a jolt of anxiety. Every pair of headlights blooming in her mirror sent a fresh wave of cold washing down her spine. The sense of being watched, of the ordeal remaining unfinished, clung to her like the night's chill. She reached her new city, unpacked her life into the waiting apartment, physically intact but psychically altered. New deadbolts clicked into place on the door. Chemical defense found a home in her glove compartment. Night driving became an ordeal to be avoided. Solitary highways entirely shunned. Time applied a balm, softening the sharp edges of terror over passing months, yet the memory remained indelible, a scar on her perception of the world. In the quiet solitude of sleepless nights, the questions still surface. Who piloted that spectral truck? What motive fueled the relentless pursuit? And the most chilling thought, does that phantom still roam the nocturnal arteries of the country, seeking another solitary traveler? Reason insists the danger has passed, that she is secure, but a deeper, more primal awareness, forged in the crucible of that endless night, whispers otherwise. For the open road, Alara now knows, holds illusions of freedom, but offers no guarantees of safety. Predators haunt its lonely stretches, patient, observant, waiting for vulnerability. So trust the unease that prickles your skin when headlights linger too long, too consistently in your mirror. That visceral warning may be your only defense, because the true horrors aren't confined to fairy tales or shadowed corners. Sometimes they are tangible, rolling implacably behind you, their gaze unwavering, anticipating the moment your vigilance falters. The highway promises passage, but it can swiftly become a cage, its destination unknown, shrouded in the vast, indifferent dark. "Did you see?" Maya's whisper was a breath against my sleeve, her fingers plucking at the worn denim. Habit nearly made me shrug her off. Maya saw specters in dancing dust motes, omens in the mundane, but a brittle edge in her voice snagged my attention. We were barely a block from Flickr Reels, the town's sole surviving video rental emporium, our Friday night pilgrimage since middle school. 16 now, the pavement beneath our feet was as familiar as our own reflections. "See what?" I murmured, my stride faltering. Ahead, a sodium street lamp sputtered, painting the fractured pavement in unreliable chiaroscuro. A sedan hummed past, its headlights momentarily stripping the anonymity from Main Street's shuttered storefronts. Nothing amiss for 8 o'clock on a Friday. "That car," Maya insisted, her grip tightening, knuckles pressing bone. "It's the third pass." I aimed for nonchalance, a flimsy shield against the sudden thrumming beneath my ribs. "Lost, maybe." The word felt thin, inadequate. Lost drivers didn't trace lazy circles around the same two teenage girls. again and then again. We walked on, silence stretching between us, but now my eyes tracked every vehicle. A crimson pickup rumbled by, not the one. A minivan, silhouettes of a family within, nope. And then, gliding into view, a dark, low-slung car, moving with the unhurried patience of a circling shark. As it slipped past us once more, a fleeting impression registered. Lone male driver, indistinct features shadowed by the car's interior, perhaps middle-aged. Keep moving, I instructed Maya, injecting a confidence I didn't possess into my voice. Flicker Reels is just there. People will be inside. Friday nights pulsed with a low hum of activity at the rental store. It was the cornerstone of our parents' permission for this solo trek. The sedan accelerated slightly, pulling ahead to hug the curb maybe 50 feet in front of us. A cold knot formed low in my belly. Our path to the store lay directly past it. The driver's door swung open, the engine a low, idling growl. A man emerged. "Evening, girls." His tone was superficially genial, yet it raised the fine hairs on my arms. "Could you point me towards Sycamore Lane?" Sycamore Lane, miles in the opposite direction. Every kid raised, breathing this town's air, knew its grid intimately. Maya's fingers dug deeper, a silent, painful plea. "Sorry, can't help," I called out, voice pitching unnaturally high, simultaneously yanking Maya off the curb and across the empty street. A desperate maneuver. He slid back into the driver's seat. For a disorienting second, relief flickered. Perhaps we'd imagined the menace. Then, tires squealed softly as the car executed a smooth U-turn, mirroring our move, now paralleling us on the opposite side. "Clara," Maya whimpered, her voice thin as thread. "What do we do?" My thoughts scrambled, snagging on fragments from the self-defense course Mom had insisted on last summer. The instructor's mantra echoed, "Trust your gut. If it feels wrong, it is. Politeness is not a shield." The car glided ahead again, stopping at the next intersection corner. He exited again, leaving the door ajar this time, an implicit invitation or threat. "Come on now," he called, the affability gone, replaced by a hard impatience. "Just directions. Don't need to be rude." Half a block still separated us from Flicker Reel's glowing sign. The street yawned, utterly deserted. Everyone tucked away for dinner, or already settled into their Friday rituals. My phone felt impossibly distant, buried in my backpack. No time. Then, a beacon. Mrs. Petrov's flower shop. Petals and pots. Light spilled from its windows, though she usually locked up promptly at 8. Impulse took over. I seized Maya's hand, a lifeline, and bolted towards the shop, wrenching the door open with such force the overhead bell jangled violently. Mrs. Petrov looked up, startled, pruning shears poised over a spray of baby's breath. "Clara? Maya? What on earth?" Her question died as she registered our wide eyes, our ragged breathing. "Someone's following," I choked out between gasps. "A car. Keep stopping." She didn't hesitate. Already moving with brisk efficiency, she flipped the hanging sign to closed, the deadbolt clicking into place with reassuring finality. Through the glass pane, I saw the dark sedan crawl past, decelerating as it neared the shop. Mrs. Petrov already had her phone pressed to her ear. "Hi, Mikhail. It's Helen Petrov. Is Ivan working tonight?" A brief pause. "Excellent. Tell him to get over to my shop immediately and call dispatch. We have a situation. I remembered then. Her son, Ivan, was Officer Petrov. The wave of relief was so profound, my legs buckled, and I collapsed onto a wrought iron chair near the counter. Maya crumpled beside me, still trembling like a leaf. Mrs. Petrov brought us water in small glass cups, her questions gentle but firm as she elicited descriptions of the car, the driver. No dismissal, no suggestion of overwrought teenage imaginations, just focused listening, her expression hardening with every detail we provided. 10 minutes later, the rhythmic flash of blue and red lights painted the shop's interior. Ivan Petrov stepped out of his patrol car. The dark sedan had vanished into the night, but Ivan meticulously recorded our account, broadcasting an alert. He insisted on personally driving us the remaining half block to flicker reels, waiting patiently while we numbly selected movies we wouldn't watch. "I'll follow you home," he stated as we climbed into the back of the cruiser. "And listen, from now on, call the shop before you start walking. Mom or I will keep an eye out till you pass." Later, cocooned on Maya's sofa, the plastic cases of our unheated movies stacked nearby, the evening's events replayed in fractured images. Our parents, when told, were visibly shaken, yet relief warred with fear in their eyes. "You trusted yourselves," my mother murmured, holding me close. "You stayed clear-headed and found help." The following day, a new hand-lettered sign appeared in Mrs. Petrov's window. "Safe Haven, open late." Soon, other Main Street businesses displayed similar signs, weaving an informal network of sanctuary along the familiar route. Police patrols increased during the hours when sidewalks saw the most foot traffic. We still made our Friday pilgrimage to flicker reels, but now as part of a text chain, fellow walkers sharing routes, confirming arrivals, a collective vigilance. Sometimes Officer Petrov would quietly escort the younger kids, just starting to brave the walk alone. The dark sedan never reappeared on our streets, but its shadow etched itself onto our awareness. We became more attuned, noticing the car that circled the block twice, the smile that didn't quite reach the eyes, the subtle dissonance of something off. Last week, I overheard two 7th graders mapping out their inaugural walk to flicker reels. Without a second thought, I gave them Mrs. Petrov's number, pointed out the safe haven signs. They offered the faint eye roll of nascent teenage invincibility, the same one I likely wore at their age, but I watched them tap the number into their phones. Some might call it fostering paranoia, teaching fear. I think we're teaching something different. The validity of intuition, the strength in community, the knowledge of where safety lies. And that, ultimately, feels more vital than any film flickering on a Friday night screen. The sky split open with a jagged seam of light, the thunderclap following so swiftly it felt like a physical blow. We flinched in unison, a nervous ripple of laughter dissolving into the thick unease that had clung to us for miles. Hours we'd navigated by dwindling hope and a failing map, searching for sanctuary from the escalating tempest. Then, materializing from the rain-lashed gloom, it stood, a skeletal silhouette against the bruised twilight, an old house, abandoned, its windows like vacant eyes staring into the storm. Seeking refuge within its walls felt less like a choice, more like a surrender to the inevitable, a decision whose dire weight we couldn't yet comprehend. Right then, Leo managed, his voice straining for a buoyancy it didn't possess. Just till morning breaks. Beats the hell out of drowning in the back seat, eh? Certainty eluded me. Yet, as another strobe of lightning bleached the landscape, revealing the deluge hammering the roof of our small car, the lack of alternatives became starkly apparent. 4 souls adrift. Leo, his partner Clara, our restless companion Finn, and myself. A pilgrimage to some distant music festival had devolved into this detour through forgotten byways, guided by capricious technology into the heart of nowhere. We snatched our bags, a frantic scramble through curtains of rain that plastered clothes to skin in moments. The great front door, warped and weather-beaten, yielded with a protracted groan that scraped along my nerves. Inside, the air hung thick and stagnant, heavy with the scent of decay and time undisturbed. Dust motes danced like phantoms in the beams of our flashlights, illuminating peeling floral wallpaper and furniture shrouded in pallid sheets, like corpses awaiting burial. God, this place breathes creepy, Finn murmured, articulating the dread tightening in my own chest. Clara, ever the pragmatist, began tugging at the spectral coverings. Let's just carve out a space. We're gone with the first light. We converged on what might have once been a parlor, constructing a fragile bastion against the gloom. Leo coaxed reluctant flames to life in the cavernous hearth, the sudden bloom of warmth and flickering light pushing back marginally against the oppressive weight of the house. Huddled close, steaming gently, rationing the last of our provisions, a precarious sense of okayness almost settled upon me. It shattered with the sound, the distinct mechanical growl of an engine slicing through the storm's symphony, swelling as it neared. We froze, eyes locking in shared alarm. Who else could possibly navigate this forsaken track on such a night? Owners, maybe, Clara whispered, though the quaver beneath the word betrayed her own disbelief. The vehicle halted directly outside. Headlight beams pierced the gaps in the boarded windows, throwing elongated, dancing shadows across the dusty room. Car doors slammed. 2, maybe 3. Male voices, low and urgent, bled through the walls. With sudden, decisive movement, Leo smothered the fire, plunging us into absolute darkness. We pressed together, breath held captive, as heavy footfalls crunched on the porch boards. The front door exploded inwards. 3 figures bulked in the opening, stark silhouettes against the stormy backdrop. They carried burdens, hefty duffel bags that emitted a dense, metallic clinking with their movements. "Clear," one rasped, a voice like grinding stone. "Stash the goods. We vanish." They lumbered deeper into the house's shadowed recesses, presumably seeking the rear rooms. The instant their footsteps faded, Leo's fingers clamped onto my arm. "Out!" he hissed, a frantic urgency in the single syllable. "Now!" But even as we scrambled for our belongings, the muffled sounds reversed direction. They were returning, No escape route, no concealment. We were cornered. A flashlight beam lanced through the darkness, sweeping, then fixing upon us, pinning us like terrified insects. Silence stretched, taut and brittle. "What in the bloody hell?" barked one of the men. "Who are you?" Leo stepped forward, palms raised in a gesture of harmlessness. "Just travelers. Storm caught us, meant no intrusion." His explanation was brutally curtailed by the sharp, definitive click of a firearm being armed. "Quiet," the man snarled, the sound laced with menace. "You shouldn't have seen this." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat threatening to burst free. Beside me, Clara trembled uncontrollably. Finn's breathing came in ragged, audible gasps. "Look," Leo tried again, his voice remarkably level despite the circumstances. "No trouble wanted. We leave now. Forget we were ever here. Forget we saw anything." The intruders exchanged loaded glances, a silent, predatory debate unfolding in the gloom. Finally, the one who radiated command spoke, his tone chillingly flat. "Can't allow that," he stated, devoid of emotion. "You saw." It was then, in that sliver of awful clarity, that my gaze fell upon something that turned my blood to ice. One of the duffel bags gaped open where it had been dropped, its contents spilling onto the grimy floorboards. Even in the dim, shifting light, the unmistakable, heavy gleam of stacked gold bars shone dully. We hadn't just found shelter. We'd stumbled into the volatile aftermath of a major score. What ensued was a descent into raw terror. The men, Silas, the co-leader, Marcus, visibly uneasy, Rook, the grim follower, held us under the unwavering threat of their weapons while they debated our fate in low, guttural tones. Silas argued for swift, permanent silence. Marcus balked, reluctance warring with fear on his face. Bound tightly, wrists already chafing, we were shoved into a back room, a cramped, musty bedchamber smelling of mildew, its single window weeping rain. The moment the lock clicked shut, frantic whispers erupted. "We have to get out," Clara choked out, tears finally breaking free. "They'll kill us." "We don't know that," I countered, forcing a conviction I didn't feel. "Maybe they'll just leave." Finn let out a harsh, disbelieving sound. "Right. Loose ends. That's us. You heard him." His bluntness was undeniable. The chilling reality settled like a shroud. Miles from civilization, trapped by a raging storm, and armed thieves debating the merits of murder. A scene ripped from some tawdry thriller, yet terrifyingly, irrevocably real. Time bled away, measured only by the sporadic rumble of distant thunder and the disquieting murmur of our captors' voices filtering through the thin wall. We took turns straining against the ropes, skin tearing, muscles burning. Dawn was a pale promise, bleeding into the gray sky, when, finally, my binding slackened. With painstaking quietness, I worked on the others, free, but perilously exposed. "Plan?" Finn whispered, massaging his raw wrists. I risked a glance through the rain-streaked window. The storm had retreated, leaving a damp, misty hush. "The car," I breathed. "Still out front. If we can just reach it." Footsteps approached the door, swift and decisive. We barely had time to slump back into feigned captivity before it swung inward. Marcus stood there, alone. His face was drawn, pale, eyes darting nervously. "Listen," he urged, voice low, rapid. "Not like them. Never wanted this. I'll help you. Get you out." Skepticism warred with desperation in our exchanged glances. Trust him? What choice remained? He moved quickly, undoing our bonds, whispering that Silas and Rook were finally asleep upstairs. A sliver of opportunity, narrow and treacherous. We moved like ghosts through the slumbering house, each creak of a floorboard amplifying the frantic pulse in my ears. The front door loomed, closer, closer. A fragile hope began to bloom. Then disaster. Finn's foot met a loose board, emitting a groan that echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. A startled shout erupted from upstairs. Instantly, gunfire exploded, the sharp crack echoing, wood splintering near our heads as we lunged for the exit. We burst into the misty dawn, a desperate sprint towards the salvation of our car. Behind us, Silas and Rook appeared, curses mingling with the roar of their weapons. I threw myself into the driver's seat, fingers fumbling, keys scraping against the ignition. The others tumbled in, a chorus of frantic cries. "Go! Go! Drive!" The engine caught, roared defiance, just as the two men reached the porch edge, guns spitting fire. I slammed the accelerator. Gravel sprayed, the car fishtailing wildly onto the muddy track. Bullets pinged against metal. The rear window imploded, showering us with glittering shards. Clara screamed. Finn yelled incoherent directions. Leo twisted, eyes scanning the receding house for pursuit. We drove, fueled by pure adrenaline, until the raw panic gradually subsided, leaving us trembling and hollow in the echoing silence. Only when the familiar asphalt of the highway appeared, merging us into the stream of early morning commuters, did the suffocating belief that we might actually survive take root. The police station, the sterile recounting of events, the descriptions of the men, the house, the gold. They investigated, found the derelict structure exactly as we described, but it stood empty. No thieves, no Marcus, no glimmer of stolen fortune. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, I jerk awake, heart pounding, the phantom echo of gunfire sharp in my ears. I see the cold glint of gold bars in flashlight beams, feel the biting chafe of ropes on my skin, hear Silas's flat voice sealing our doom. We sought refuge from a physical storm and blundered into a maelstrom of human darkness. It's a terrifying truth, how swiftly a simple wrong turn can unravel the world, plunging unsuspecting travelers into a waking nightmare. Road trips hold no allure now, and abandoned houses, they remain firmly locked in the realm of horrors, best left undisturbed. A peculiar disquiet settles when you enter a space where chronology seems suspended, where the very air feels preserved, untouched by the currents of the outside world. Such was the sensation gripping me the instant I crossed the threshold of that derelict hotel. Trespass wasn't my intention, yet a ravenous curiosity had seized me. In retrospect, that impulse should have been throttled, starved, for once inside, the place radiated an undeniable wrongness, an inexplicable quality that haunts my memory still. It began, as these things sometimes do, with a story spun by my friend Leo. We were adrift on a cross-country pilgrimage, just the two of us, arrowing toward a small-town rendezvous with friends for a weekend beneath the pines. A roadside diner beckoned for supper, and there, amidst the clatter of cutlery and the scent of stale coffee, Leo first caught wind of the lakeside ruin. Our server, a woman whose eyes held the weariness of decades etched into their corners, spoke of it idly while topping off our water glasses. Abandoned for generations, she murmured, a skeletal finger pointing vaguely toward the town's edge where it slumped beside a quiet lake. A jewel of the roaring 20s, she said, until something, a hushed affair shrouded in local silence, transpired, leaving the grand structure to succumb to time and neglect. Leo, ever the connoisseur of the forsaken and forgotten, ignited. "We have to see it," he declared, a conspirator's grin cleaving his face. My own enthusiasm remained stubbornly dormant. The waitress's tone, the careful way she skirted the details, hinted at a secret best left undisturbed. But Leo pressed, his usual charm deployed like a well-worn tool. "Imagine the history, Silas. It'll be an adventure. We have hours before we need to be anywhere." My instincts screamed refusal, a primal urge to veer away. Instead, a resigned shrug escaped me. It was merely brick and mortar, wasn't it? What harm could befall us? We navigated towards the hotel as dusk began to bleed across the sky, tracing the route the waitress had sketched on a napkin. The asphalt narrowed, surrendering to a winding track swallowed by densely packed trees, their branches interlacing overhead like skeletal fingers. With each mile devoured, the world grew quieter, the highway's drone dissolving into the sibilant whisper of wind through leaves. And then it loomed. The hotel materialized from the twilight, immense, its silhouette stark against the deepening violet. Its former majesty was a ghost, the facade crumbling, windows like vacant sockets, sections of the roof bowing inward. Ivy and opportunistic weeds scaled the walls, tendrils grasping at shattered balconies. Yet it was the lake that truly arrested me. Positioned behind the edifice, glimpsed through gaps in the trees, its surface was unnervingly placid, a perfect mirror reflecting the bruised heavens. No tremor, no ripple disturbed its obsidian sheen. It felt profoundly unnatural, as if the water itself held its breath in a state of perpetual, watchful stillness. Leo, oblivious, was already out of the car, striding toward the main entrance with palpable excitement. A moment I lingered, my gaze drawn back to the water's eerie calm, before scrambling after him, unwilling to remain alone in the encroaching gloom. Against expectation, the heavy doors yielded with a groan that echoed like a dying gasp. Inside, the air hung thick, laden with dust motes dancing in the faint light, and the pervasive scent of damp decay. The lobby gaped, vast and spectral, dominated by a sweeping central staircase and the skeletal remains of a grand chandelier suspended far above, weeping crystal tears onto the floor below. Wallpaper, faded and brittle, peeled away in strips, revealing the lath and plaster beneath. The floor crunched underfoot, a mosaic of splintered furniture, shattered glass, and fallen plaster. It was the expected detritus of abandonment, yet beneath it lay something more, an oppressive weight, as though the very walls retained memories they refused to relinquish. Our footsteps resounded unnaturally in the cavernous silence as we drifted through the lobby. Leo, effervescent, snapped photos with his phone, pointing towards shadowed archways and potential discoveries. I feigned enthusiasm, but with every step deeper into the hotel's heart, a knot tightened in my chest. The air seemed to thicken, resisting each breath, and sounds lingered, stretched unnaturally thin. We ascended the grand staircase, the aged wood protesting beneath our weight. Upstairs, corridors stretched into shadow, flanked by guest rooms with doors hanging askew. Here, the wallpaper was a mere suggestion, ghosted onto the walls. Leo was keen to probe the vacant rooms, but my attention snagged on something further down the hall, a single, imposing door, larger than the rest, firmly closed. It felt discordant, an anomaly in the pervasive decay. I beckoned Leo, and together we approached. The closer we drew, the more palpable the atmospheric pressure became. My chest constricted, a physical weight bearing down, yet compulsion overruled caution. I needed to see what lay beyond. Leo's hand reached out, the brass knob turning with a sharp, resonant click. The door swung inward with ponderous slowness, unveiling a cavernous space, a ballroom frozen in time. Immense windows, stretching from floor to ceiling, lined one wall, their glass obscured by layers of grime. Another colossal chandelier, twin to the lobby's phantom, hung shrouded in dust. The floor was a battlefield of broken furniture, overturned chairs, fractured tables, and in a far corner, a grand piano, its keys yellowed like old teeth. But the room's desolation wasn't what seized my breath. It was the figures. Initially, my mind registered them as mannequins, or perhaps forgotten statuary. 5 inert forms positioned near the tall windows, their backs toward us. They were clad in garments from a bygone era, heads canted slightly, as if contemplating the view across the lake. Their absolute stillness was convincing. I opened my mouth to share this observation with Leo, but then a minute shift. One figure's head swiveled, a slow, almost imperceptible rotation, just enough to reveal a sliver of profile against the dusty light. My breath hitched. Statues they were not. These were people, or their remnants. Their flesh possessed a pallid, grayish cast, their antiquated clothes hanging loosely on gaunt frames. They stood transfixed, gazes locked on the window panes, silent sentinels awaiting some unseen arrival. The one that had moved didn't complete the turn. With excruciating slowness, it returned its gaze to the lake. Leo, engrossed in the room's ruined grandeur, remained oblivious. My hand, trembling uncontrollably, shot out, grasping his arm, pulling him back towards the doorway. "Leo, we have to go," I whispered, my voice a fragile thread against the sudden hammering in my ears. He frowned, perplexed. "Go? Why? We just found this place." "Look," I hissed, my nod directing him toward the silent congregation by the windows. He followed my gesture, his features blanching as comprehension dawned. For a suspended moment, we were paralyzed, observers trapped in a tableau of eerie quietude, watching the figures watch the lake. Then, without preamble, one pivoted fully to face us. Its eyes were wide, unnaturally distended, stretched beyond human limits. Its mouth hung slack, a silent O of surprise or agony. And then, with a chilling synchronicity, the others began to turn, one by one, heads rotating on unseen axes with a grotesque smoothness, until all 5 pairs of vacant eyes were fixed upon us. That was the catalyst. We bolted, instinct overriding thought. We didn't pause, didn't look back until we burst from the hotel's oppressive embrace and tumbled into the car, breath tearing raggedly from our lungs as fingers fumbled with the ignition. I refused to glance back at the looming structure, yet I felt them, felt their collective gaze pressing against the back of my skull, watching from those dirt-streaked windows. Leo said nothing, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he wrenched the car back onto the narrow track, the hotel receding into the twilight like a bad dream. Silence stretched between us until the comforting drone of the highway enveloped us miles later, a fragile shield of normalcy. What resided within that hotel, I cannot say, but of this I am certain. It was never truly abandoned. Something lingered, preserved in that pocket of stalled time, waiting. And whatever it was, it did not appreciate being disturbed. This high mountain refuge, this cabin etched into the slope, was meant to be an absolution from the clamor of existence. I craved the austerity of silence, the sharp, clean inhalation of dawn air, untainted by the world below. The inaugural night unfurled with a quiet promise fulfilled. But the second night, the silence curdled. A distinct awareness bloomed, cold and unwelcome, the certainty of unseen eyes upon me. No tangible proof, merely an instinctual tremor, a primal warning humming beneath the floorboards of my consciousness. Soon, it began to coalesce, sharpening from vague premonition into a silhouette limned against the bruised twilight, a sentinel stationed amongst the pines where the light bled away. Now, the nights are fraught geometries of tension, and the days offer little respite. Solitude, the very balm I sought, feels increasingly like a snare. Weeks have dissolved since my arrival. I recall the decisive thud of bags dropped inside, the rhythmic stacking of logs beside the dormant hearth, the meticulous sweep of my gaze into every shadowed recess. The dwelling itself is modest, a primary chamber encompassing the kitchen alcove, flanked by a sleeping space and a cramped washroom. Dominating the central room, an antique wood-burning stove radiates vital warmth against the persistent chill, its iron belly kept perpetually full. Tall, narrow windows pierce the log walls, overlooking a slender porch that traces the front and one flank of the cabin. Beyond lies naught but an expanse of snowdrifts and the stoic assembly of pines, their spires piercing the gray sky. The sole artery connecting this place to the world is a single-lane track descending the mountain, rendered impassable by capricious weather, a feature I once counted as its principal virtue. No proximate clamor, no thrum of traffic, only the wilderness and Elias. The initial brace of days was spent in the rituals of nesting, hauling firewood until my arms screamed, arranging meager possessions, coaxing the small generator behind the cabin to life, establishing my laptop upon the scarred kitchen table. My ambitions were simple: to write, perhaps, or simply to unravel the knots in my thoughts, to let the mountain air scour my mind clean. Daylight hours passed in serene observation, the soughing wind orchestrating the trees, the soft percussion of snow dislodged from burdened branches. Evenings descended into a deeper quietude, yet still I felt anchored. Bolts slid home, curtains drawn tight, the flicker of candle flames casting dancing shadows. That first night was a deep, untroubled breath. But dusk, on the second rotation of the earth, found me lingering by a window pane. Coffee simmered fragrantly on the stove, its aroma a fleeting comfort. My gaze drifted outward, snagging on something indeterminate at the forest's edge. Was it merely the gnarled architecture of a trunk, or something more animate, residing beyond the cleared perimeter where the timber thickened into shadow? As my vision sharpened, a flicker, perceived or imagined, caught my eye. A slow, fluid shift, like darkness rearranging itself. Then, absolute stillness. A wave of disquiet washed through my gut, cold and viscous. My pulse quickened its cadence. Nothing, I reasoned. A trick of the fading light, atmospheric distortion. I turned from the window, poured my coffee, and forced the image from my mind. Later, enveloped in the profound blackness of the cabin, all lamps extinguished, I risked a glance through a sliver in the curtains. The celestial sphere glittered with frigid stars, though the moon offered only a pairing of light, leaving the landscape steeped in gloom. I strained, searching the familiar contours of the night. Nothing at first. Then, as my pupils dilated, a faint anomaly registered near the base of a towering pine, an upright shape, distinctly humanoid in its outline, yet devoid of discernible features, a cutout against the lesser dark. I watched, breath held captive in my chest, and swore I saw it glide, fractionally, closer. The shallow rhythm of my breathing hitched. That icy sensation, like spectral fingers, traced my spine. Transfixed, I stared, battling the urge to blink. When I inevitably did, the form seemed to have advanced again, subtly but undeniably forward. I recoiled from the window, mind racing like a trapped bird. A frantic debate ignited within me. Confront it, shout, brandish a light. Instead, paralyzed by indecision and a burgeoning terror, I remained rooted, questioning the very sanity of my perception. Eventually, the need for certainty eclipsed the fear. Retrieving my heavy flashlight from a kitchen drawer, I unbolted the front door and stepped onto the porch. The cold struck like a physical blow, my exhalations instantly crystallizing in the torch's beam. Snow groaned beneath my boots. I swept the light across the wall of trees. Emptiness. The shape had dissolved. Methodically, I circumnavigated the cabin, the beam slicing into every potential hiding place. Only pines, snow, and the profound silence of the mountains answered. No tracks marred the pristine surface. No sign that anyone, anything, had stood where I'd seen it. Retreating inside, the click of the lock felt woefully inadequate. Sleep that night was a shallow, fitful thing. Morning light brought a measure of foolishness, fatigue, shadows, an overactive imagination. Convenient explanations presented themselves. Stepping out to gather more firewood, the rationalizations evaporated. There, etched into the snow, were the prints, dark depressions forming a precise circle around the cabin, maintaining a consistent distance of perhaps 20 or 30 feet from the walls. I approached cautiously. Not animal spoor. These resembled boot prints, yet possessed a scale subtly larger than my own. I traced their circumference, confirming the unsettling perfection of the loop. The snow within each print was compacted, suggesting a deliberate, measured tread. My stomach constricted. My eyes scanned the silent, indifferent landscape. Nothing stirred but a whisper of wind through the high branches. I captured images with my phone, clumsy shots hampered by the flat light, knowing they failed to convey the chilling reality. That day became an exercise in strained normalcy. I threw myself into mundane tasks, scrubbing the small kitchen, organizing pantry shelves, checking the generator's fuel levels, testing the crackling emergency radio. Midday, I ventured out again, scrutinizing the tree line under the full glare of the sun. It remained impassive, revealing no lurking forms, no unnatural stillness. But as the sun commenced its slow descent, painting the western peaks in hues of fire, the familiar tendrils of anxiety began to coil within me. I built the fire high, secured the door, drew the curtains tight. Attempting to write proved futile. My gaze kept snapping towards the windows, listening beyond the crackle of the stove. Evening deepened, and with it came the sound, faint yet unmistakable, the crunch of footsteps on snow, slow, calculated, each step isolated in the immense quiet. I froze, listening intently, the blood beginning to roar in my ears. My hand tightened on the table's edge. The steps persisted for a few moments, then ceased. Rising silently, I moved to the window, easing the curtain aside just enough to peer into the gathering dark. It was there again, the shape occupying nearly the same position as the previous night. Indisputably, the outline of a figure, perhaps slightly stooped, or maybe it was merely the deceptive play of shadow. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I reached instinctively for the flashlight, but before my fingers closed around it, the figure took a discernible step forward. A violent jolt, like an electric shock, shot through me. No face, no clothing, just this solid block of darkness against the lesser dark. I yanked the curtain closed, heart battering my chest wall. Courage, I commanded myself, though my hands trembled uncontrollably. Flinging the door open, I stabbed the flashlight beam towards the spot. Nothing. An empty stage of snow and sentinel trees, their upper branches swaying gently. The shaking intensified, born now more of raw nerves than the biting cold. I advanced a few yards from the porch, my voice thin and reedy as I called out, "Hello, who's out there?" Only silence echoed back. A frantic circuit of the cabin revealed nothing. No fresh impressions in the snow, no disturbance. Just the plume of my own breath and the squeak of my boots. After several minutes of fruitless searching, I retreated inside, double locking the door, fighting down the rising tide of panic. That night, the flashlight became my talisman, clutched tightly even in brief snatches of sleep. Each creak of the aging timbers, each sigh of the wind, jolted me awake, convinced I heard movement just beyond the walls. Dawn found me, bleary-eyed and exhausted. My first act was to scan the world outside. More footprints, the same circuit, reinforced, overlaid with fresh impressions. I examined them closely. The circle remained equidistant, unnervingly precise. Who was orchestrating this? To what end? And the vanishing act? How? A tightness constricted my chest. The impulse to flee warred with a stubborn refusal to be chased away, compounded by the practical concern of snow-laden roads. Yet, the thought of escape pulsed insistently. I placed a call to the nearest ranger station. My voice, I hoped, sounded calmer than I felt as I reported a trespasser, someone prowling around my cabin nocturnally. Had I seen them clearly? No, I admitted. They promised to dispatch someone when possible, perhaps the next day, citing staffing shortages. I resisted the urge to plead, simply stating, I'm worried someone's deliberately trying to unsettle me. They recorded my details and assured me they would follow up. The day was spent in a flurry of physical activity. Chopping wood behind the cabin offered a welcome distraction, the rhythmic impact jarring my bones, the cold air searing my lungs. Yet, even as muscles ached, my senses remained hyper-alert, my head constantly swiveling, anticipating that peripheral glimpse of the watcher. Hours bled away under a sky the color of lead. In the mid-afternoon, drawn by a morbid curiosity, I returned to the circle of prints. I studied the spacing, consistent, rhythmic. I tried to extrapolate the walker's height, the make of their boots. The impressions remained frustratingly vague, blurred by ice crystals, revealing no distinct tread pattern, only the unsettling size relative to my own. Late afternoon arrived, dragging the familiar dread in its wake. As daylight leached from the sky, the tension ratcheted tighter within me. I prepared a hasty meal, canned stew, heated over the stove, but ate mechanically, my attention fixed on the windows. Outside, the world dissolved through shades of orange and bruised purple into impenetrable darkness. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. I lit a lantern, its steady glow a small defiance, and confirmed the flashlight held fresh batteries. Around the time true dark descended, the sound returned. That deliberate crunch, pause, crunch. I set my bowl aside, every nerve ending alight, slow, measured steps drawing nearer. My heart began a heavy, suffocating rhythm. My hands felt slick with sweat. Rising, flashlight in hand, I crept towards the front door, my own footfalls loud on the wooden floor. I unlocked the bolt, hesitated. The crunching continued, then abruptly stopped. With a surge of adrenaline, I threw the door open, bathing the immediate area in the harsh glare of the beam. Empty. The light carved shapes from the snow and the nearest trees, but revealed no intruder. Stepping onto the porch, breath catching in my throat, the fine hairs on my neck prickled. I know you're out here. The words emerged thin, quavering. Silence answered, vast and absolute. No flicker of movement. I slammed the door shut, retreated inside, the heavy thud of the lock echoing the frantic beat in my chest. This time, I resolved to watch. Extinguishing all light save the low burning lantern positioned behind me, I settled near the window, parting the curtain by the barest fraction. The forest was an abyss of black. Patience was required for my eyes to adapt. Minutes stretched. Then, I saw it. Closer now. Perhaps within 30 yards of the cabin walls. It stood utterly motionless, oriented towards me. My mouth turned to dust. The throb of my pulse resonated in my skull. We remained locked in this silent tableau, watcher and watched, for what felt like an eternity, but was likely no more than a minute or two. My palms grew damp. The thought of reaching for my phone, for proof, flickered through my mind, but the fear of breaking eye contact held me captive. As if sensing my intent, the figure seemed to compress, to crouch or shrink downwards. I blinked, an involuntary betrayal, and it was gone. I scrambled upright, stumbling, nearly falling, rushing outside once more, flashlight slicing the night. I found only undisturbed snow. No fresh tracks led away, no sign of passage, just the cold, the dark, and the suffocating silence. An hour I paced the confines of the small cabin, a caged animal seeking an escape that wasn't there. The questions hammered relentlessly. Why? How? The sheer impossibility of the disappearances gnawed at my sanity. Settling eventually into the chair by the stove, I listened, straining to decipher every nocturnal sound. Was that scraping near the walls, or just the wind's complaint? My body remained coiled, primed for flight or fight. The flashlight and a heavy iron fire poker lay within easy reach. I remained vigilant until the first frail hints of dawn painted the eastern sky. Rising stiffly, eyes burning from sleeplessness, I forced myself to look outside. Of course, the footprints, a fresh circuit laid upon the old, still perfect, still mocking. I searched again for any deviation, any track leading away into the trees. Nothing. It was as if the walker simply materialized and dematerialized, leaving only this chilling signature. A surge of impotent fury mixed with primal fear washed over me. I kicked savagely at the snow, disrupting the nearest prints, before realizing, too late, the potential destruction of evidence. Frustration choked me. My breath came in ragged gasps, heart pounding against my ribs. I just wanted it to end. I remain, still here, in this isolated place, still awaiting the promised arrival of the rangers. A storm gathers in the forecast, threatening to render the mountain road truly impassable, trapping me further. Part of me screams to pack, to risk the drive, consequences be damned. Yet another part whispers caution, suggests a rational explanation waits just beyond my fear-fogged perception. A drifter, a peculiar local. But each night, the shape returns. Each morning, the footprints reappear, that flawless, deliberate circle in the snow. Even now, as the sun bleeds its last light over the jagged peaks, I sit at the table, bracing myself. My gaze darts compulsively to the windows, half expecting to find the silhouette already waiting. A knot of tension resides permanently between my shoulder blades. My hands tremble slightly. If the crunching steps begin again tonight, what then? One impulse urges me to charge out, to confront this tormentor head on. Another pleads for retreat, to curl into the smallest corner and cease to exist. My stomach churns with anticipatory dread. There is no peace here, no clarity, only this suffocating premonition. I recount this, committed to words, because the silence has become unbearable. Perhaps another soul might read this, might offer belief, or even an answer. All I know with certainty is this: I'm not alone in this wilderness. Something or someone waits for the dusk, and when the light fails, it manifests, step by silent step, drawing its invisible perimeter. Then, with the dawn, it vanishes, leaving only the snow-etched enigma of its passage. Too perfect, too controlled, utterly inexplicable. The solitude I craved has become a shared space, haunted by a presence I cannot comprehend, and that is the most terrifying realization of all.